On March 28, 1979, at 4 a.m., a stuck valve at 3 Mile Island Nuclear Plant near Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, triggered a cascade of failures. That disaster would cost $2.4 billion to clean up, making it the most expensive industrial accident in American history at the time. No one died from radiation, but something else died that day: America's nuclear future. In the aftermath, 51 reactor orders were canceled, representing $100 billion in abandoned investments. The nuclear industry discovered a brutal truth that haunts it to this day. In nuclear power, perception is reality, and one mistake can destroy decades of progress. This is the uncomfortable truth about nuclear energy that advocates don't like to discuss. Yes, it's clean. Yes, it's powerful. Yes, it's statistically safe. But nuclear power comes with unique disadvantages that have crippled its growth and may ultimately limit its role in our energy future. These aren't anti-nuclear talking points. These are real engineering, economic, and social challenges that the industry has struggled with for 70 years and still hasn't fully solved. The numbers tell a sobering story. In 1974, the Atomic Energy Commission predicted the U.S. would have 1,000 nuclear reactors by the year 2000. Today, we have 93. Globally, nuclear share of electricity production peaked in 17.5% in 1996. Today, it's down to 10%. This isn't because of ignorant fear-mongering. It's because nuclear power faces fundamental disadvantages that make it increasingly difficult to deploy in the real world. Consider the Vogtle nuclear plant in Georgia, the only nuclear plant under construction in America. Originally budgeted at $14 billion, with completion in 2016, it's now expected to cost $35 billion, and it won't be fully operational until 2024 at the earliest. That's $17,000 per kilowatt of capacity, 10 times the cost of natural gas, and 5 times the cost of utility-scale solar with battery storage. When a single project can bankrupt utilities and double ratepayers' bills, you're not dealing with irrational fear. You're dealing with rational economics. The disadvantages of nuclear energy aren't reasons to abandon it entirely, but they are reasons to be honest about its limitations. Because until we acknowledge and address these real problems, nuclear power will remain what it's been for the past 30 years, a technology with enormous potential, trapped by equally enormous challenges. The economic nightmare. The first and most brutal disadvantage of nuclear energy is cost. Not just the price tag, but the entire economic model that makes nuclear plants financial time bombs. The Olkiluoto 3 reactor in Finland tells the story perfectly. Announced in 2000 with a fixed price of 3 billion euros and a 2009 completion date, it finally started operating in 2023, at a cost exceeding 11 billion euros. The construction company, Areva, went bankrupt. The utility, TVO, spent 14 years paying interest on a non-producing asset. This isn't incompetence, it's the nature of nuclear construction. Nuclear plants are victims of what economists call negative learning curves. In every other industry, the more you build, the cheaper it gets, not nuclear. Each new plant in the West costs more than the last. The reasons are complex but devastating. Every reactor is essentially a custom project. By the time you finish building one, the workforce has dispersed, the supply chains have moved on, and the regulations have changed. You start the next one from scratch. The financial structure makes it worse. A nuclear plant costs $10 to $20 billion up front and takes 10 to 15 years to build in Western countries. During that time, you're paying interest on billions of dollars with zero revenue. At a 5% interest rate, the cost doubles every 14 years. By the time your plant starts generating power, you might owe twice what you borrowed. Compare that to a natural gas plant. $1 billion cost, 3-year construction, and you're making money while your nuclear competitor is still pouring foundations. But the real killer is market risk. When you start building a nuclear plant, you're betting on electricity prices 15 years into the future. The Shoreham nuclear plant on Long Island illustrates this perfectly. Completed in 1984 at a cost of $6 billion, it never generated 1 watt of commercial power. Public opposition and changing economics made it worthless. Ratepayers are still paying for it 40 years later. That's the nuclear disadvantage. You can spend decades and billions only to end up with a $6 billion concrete tomb. The small modular reactor revolution was supposed to fix this. The idea was to build reactors in factories, like airplanes. The reality? NuScale, the furthest along, has seen its estimated costs triple from $3 billion to $9.3 billion for a 462-megawatt plant. That's $20,000 per kilowatt, worse than traditional nuclear. The economies of scale that make large reactors viable don't exist at smaller sizes. Physics doesn't care about your business model. The waste problem nobody wants. The second major disadvantage is nuclear waste, not because it's technically insoluble, but because it's politically radioactive. The U.S. has spent over $15 billion on the Yucca Mountain Repository in Nevada. It was abandoned in 2011, after 30 years of development. That's $15 billion for a hole in the ground we'll never use. Meanwhile, 90,000 tons of spent fuel sit in temporary storage at reactor sites, accumulating at 2,000 tons per year. The waste problem isn't really about science, it's about time. Nuclear waste remains hazardous for thousands of years. Plutonium-239 has a half-life of 24,000 years. That's longer than recorded human history. We're asking society to manage dangerous materials for periods longer than any human institution has ever existed. The ancient Egyptians built pyramids 4,500 years ago. We need storage that lasts 5 times longer. Every nuclear plant becomes a de facto waste storage site because nobody wants the waste transported through their community. The NIMBY problem, not in my backyard, is exponentially worse for nuclear waste. Towns will fight solar farms, but they'll go to war over nuclear waste. The result? Spent fuel pools, designed for temporary storage, now hold decades of waste, packed far more densely than originally intended. It's safe, but it's also a political time bomb. The international picture is no better. Only Finland has a functioning deep geological repository. France reprocesses its waste, but still needs final disposal. Japan planned to reprocess, but has faced decades of delays and cost overruns. The UK has 140 tons of separated plutonium, the world's largest stockpile, with no clear disposal path. Every country kicks the can down the road, leaving future generations to solve a problem we created. Transportation adds another layer of complexity. Moving nuclear waste requires special casks that can survive crashes, fires, and attacks. Each shipment becomes a potential target and a political flashpoint. Routes must be planned years in advance. Security must be coordinated across jurisdictions. And any accident, even minor, becomes international news. The 1987 Goiânia accident in Brazil proves the point. Scavengers found a medical radiation source. 4 people died, but millions were terrified. Now imagine that fear multiplied by thousands of waste shipments. The catastrophic risk reality. The third disadvantage is the one nobody wants to talk about honestly. Yes, nuclear is statistically the safest form of energy. Yes, modern designs are incredibly safe. But nuclear accidents have a unique characteristic. When they go wrong, they go spectacularly, visibly, unforgettably wrong. Coal kills more people every day, but those deaths are statistical. Nuclear accidents create exclusion zones, mass evacuations, and generational trauma. Chernobyl created a 1,000-square-mile exclusion zone that's still uninhabitable 38 years later. The cleanup has cost over $235 billion and still isn't finished. Fukushima's exclusion zone displaced 154,000 people. Decommissioning will take 40 years and cost $200 billion. These aren't just numbers, they're entire regions erased from the map, communities destroyed, lives upended. When coal kills, it kills individuals. When nuclear fails, it deletes cities. The probability is tiny, but the consequences are enormous. This creates what risk experts call dread risk. People will accept a 1 in 100 chance of dying in a car crash over their lifetime, but they won't accept a 1 in 10 million chance of a nuclear accident. It's irrational, but deeply human. We're wired to fear spectacular, uncontrollable events more than routine dangers. And nuclear accidents push every psychological button: invisible threat, delayed effects, genetic damage, corporate cover-ups, government incompetence. Insurance markets, the ultimate judges of risk, treat nuclear as uninsurable. The Price-Anderson Act in the US caps nuclear liability at $13 billion, with taxpayers covering anything beyond that.
No private insurer will fully cover a nuclear plant. When professionals whose job is calculating risk refuse to touch something, that tells you something important. Fukushima's total costs may exceed $500 billion. That's a risk no private entity can bear. Modern designs are safer, but they can't eliminate the perception problem. Every nuclear plant, no matter how safe, carries the ghosts of Chernobyl and Fukushima. One accident anywhere becomes an indictment everywhere. When Fukushima melted down, Germany shut down its perfectly safe reactors, 6,000 miles away. That's the nuclear disadvantage. You're not just managing your own risk, you're managing the world's fear, the institutional failures. The fourth disadvantage is institutional. Nuclear power requires a level of competence, stability, and long-term thinking that most societies struggle to maintain. A nuclear plant operates for 60 to 80 years. It requires decommissioning that takes decades, and it creates waste lasting millennia. It demands institutional continuity that few human organizations have ever achieved. The Soviet Union had some of the world's best nuclear physicists, but institutional failures caused Chernobyl. Japan had excellent engineers, but regulatory capture and complacency caused Fukushima. These weren't technical failures. They were failures of human systems. Nuclear power is unforgiving of the kinds of institutional decay that every society experiences. When your Department of Motor Vehicles fails, you wait in longer lines. When your nuclear regulator fails, you evacuate cities. The expertise problem is getting worse. The nuclear workforce is aging out. In the US, the average nuclear worker is over 50. Universities have shut down nuclear engineering programs, the supply chain has withered, we've even lost the ability to forge large reactor vessels domestically. Westinghouse, once the crown jewel of American nuclear technology, went bankrupt in 2017. When you need specialized expertise and get MBAs, when you need 30-year planning and get quarterly earnings reports, nuclear power becomes impossible. Regulatory dysfunction adds another layer. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission in the US hasn't approved a new reactor design in decades. The approval process costs hundreds of millions of dollars and takes years, killing innovation. But loosening regulations isn't the answer. Nuclear's unique dangers demand strict oversight. You're trapped between regulatory sclerosis that prevents progress and regulatory capture that enables disaster. There's no easy solution. International proliferation concerns make everything worse. Every civilian nuclear program creates expertise, materials, and facilities that could be diverted to weapons. The line between peaceful and military atoms is thin. Iran's nuclear program started with atoms for peace. India used a Canadian research reactor to build its bomb. The more countries that have nuclear power, the more that could develop weapons. It's not inevitable, but it's a risk that compounds over time. The harsh reality. The disadvantages of nuclear energy aren't myths or misunderstandings. They're real constraints that have shaped its history and will limit its future. The crushing economics that make plants unfinanceable, the waste that nobody wants, the catastrophic risks that terrify populations, the institutional demands that exceed most societies' capabilities. These aren't problems that better technology alone can solve. Nuclear power exists in a cruel paradox. It demands perfection in an imperfect world. It requires 50-year commitments in societies that can't plan past the next election. It needs public trust while creating risks that destroy trust. It promises clean, abundant energy, but delivers cost overruns, construction delays, and occasional disasters that define generations. This doesn't mean abandoning nuclear power. Its advantages in fighting climate change are too important. But it means being honest about why nuclear has failed to live up to its promise. The atom's power is real, but so are the barriers to harnessing it. Until we acknowledge these disadvantages and develop new approaches to address them, nuclear will remain what it's been for decades, a technology perpetually on the verge of a breakthrough that never quite arrives. The future of nuclear power won't be determined by its theoretical advantages, but by its practical disadvantages. The question isn't whether nuclear is good or bad. It's whether we can build institutions, economics, and technologies that can manage its unique challenges. History suggests that's harder than splitting the atom itself. Want to understand why some countries succeed with nuclear while others fail catastrophically? Watch our video comparing France's nuclear triumph with Germany's nuclear phase-out disaster. Click here to discover how politics, culture, and economics determine whether nuclear power becomes a nation's salvation or its most expensive